Hi everybody. I hope you are all doing well. I am joined here by my colleague Lincoln McCall, who's an exceptional young leader in the community. I want to introduce myself, and then I'll give a chance for her to introduce herself. As mentioned, I'm Walter Cortina. I'm a student at the High School for Recording Arts. I'm a senior, about to graduate. Actually, the first ever in my bloodline generation. So I'm very happy to be walking across that stage very soon. I'm also a president of Bridgemakers. Bridgemakers is a youth-led nonprofit that's focused on mentoring, supporting, and focusing on the voice and leadership of marginalized youth as they help shape communities to help them break out of cycles like poverty, miseducation, and violence. Just a lot of cycles that keep marginalized down and whole, I could say, from succeeding and being the happiest they can in life. Um, and I'll leave it there and I'll pass it off to Lincoln so she can introduce herself before I move on to some of our goals for today.
Hey everybody, my name is Lincoln Bacall. I'm 18, graduated from high school a year ago, and I work with Bridgemakers. I'm just really passionate about education advocacy. I've been working on this pretty much all throughout high school, so for the past 4 or 5 years. And I've been to a lot of different schools in my life, some of them traditional, some of them non-traditional. And really what I've seen is that not a single one of those environments actually worked for me. And I graduated and everything went fine, but I did not get what I wanted to get out of my education. So all of the work that I do and everything that I want to be a part of is empowering young people just to make sure that our school system really reflects who we are and what we want out of our lives and what we need to be prepared for in order to get what we want out of our lives. So yeah, I'm going to pass it back over to Walter. We're going to talk a little bit about Bridgemakers, which he introduced, and what we're going to do here today.
Hey, thank you. Like, I appreciate you introducing yourself. And I do just want to mention again, Bridgemakers is just focused on uplifting the voice and the power and the stories of young people. Here today, we really want the participants to leave knowing how to activate students' stories, voice, leadership, and power within their schools, and are convinced that this activation is essential for the growth and for the success of young people. Um, and so, yeah, those would be our goals for today. And we'll just be walking you all through our experience, why we think all this is very well important, and why it matters to us. And I'll pass it over to Lincoln.
Yeah, so one thing to note is I want everyone here to be as involved in this discussion as possible. So we are going to stop for questions quite a bit, but if we say anything that you'd like to hear more about or that you have questions about, feel free to put that in the chat at any time, and we're going to be looking at that and responding to that as it happens. So just please participate in the chat as much as you feel comfortable. We would love to hear from you. And everyone who hasn't introduced yourself in the chat, I also would like to know who's here. So just say, your name, where you're from, maybe how you're doing today, and what kind of organization you work with or what brought you here. So I would love to see those introductions and questions coming in throughout the presentation. But yeah, I'm gonna move to the next slide. Basically, so why does this even matter? And really, bridge makers, which Walter touched on briefly, and we will get into a little bit more. Bridge makers is proof that empowered young people from all backgrounds and all levels of privilege are able to change the world. This is really like a core concept for us that, throughout my life, I have been discounted because I am a young person. And people think that I am not capable of the things that I am capable of. This is really important that we are giving every single young person the power and the authority and the tools that they need to do everything that they want with their lives. Um, and I'm going to pass it over to Walter to share a little bit of a story about empowerment, and I'm going to be sharing that too. But yeah, why don't you tell us what empowerment has done for you?
Hey, thank you, Lincoln. All right, so like, this is kind of my like favorite part of my whole like, presentation because it excuse me, I'm kind of sick and no, it's not COVID. But I was get started. So in eighth grade, I had a chance to present to the board of directors, um, and the reason why is because I was working with a few other Latino students to try to make the school a safe haven. And I'll back up a little bit, mention why that was so. important to me. So my dad got deported when I was about 7 years old, and my mom got deported when I was like 13 years old, you know? And so just knowing the fact that a policy, a law was able to give the authority for law to rip apart a family, I was like, I don't want to stand around and like not do anything about it. You know, my school director, John Bacall, was actually here. Uh, he presented to me this idea that I and a few other students could give a presentation to the board of directors about making the school a safe haven for immigrants. So like as I mentioned, it's a safe place. Like so immigration can't come into school and just mess with families or try to take like somebody's parents or students, you know? And that was once in a lifetime, like or like a one in a lifetime opportunity, because it was the first time I was um ever able to speak up and speak about why I care about this and why it's important to me, not about why I like it or my opinion on it. No, like a real life change to how it could keep me safer and other students and their families, you know. And that led me to want to start a change makers team at our school, which we'll dive more into. But I do just want to get back to that story. That story was a very powerful, very unique moment for me in my life, because like I mentioned, had never been able to speak to power to anybody who actually makes uh actions in my life. I could say like schools. Like we know schools impact young people a lot. They go there 5 days a week out of seven, 8 hours a day, you know. And so for me to be able to speak to the board of directors who govern the whole school was a very amazing opportunity. And it really boosted my motivation, my dream, my vision to what my voice and story could be. And I don't want to flood the floor too long. So I'll pass it over to Lincoln again so she could share her empowerment story.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar experience. Basically, so we both went to Venture Academy for a while in high school, and that's where I graduated from. So in order to graduate from Venture, you needed to have an internship, which I really valued. I was very excited to do that because out of the building learning is really important. Um, so I had the opportunity to intern with the Citizens League, which is a nonprofit think tank in downtown St. Paul. And basically, the executive director of the Citizens League had visited Venture. I remembered him, and I was like, okay, I need an internship. I'm kind of interested in political things. I will go intern there. Sorry, I also don't have COVID. I just, um, but basically I showed up. I was 13 years old, and I went there 7 hours a day, 2 days a week for about 3 months. And I don't think the executive director knew how old I was, or he didn't tell the other employees how old I was, but because they gave me the same level of work that they would have given any other intern. I was working on their main project. I was contacting people on behalf of the organization. I was writing documents that were sent out to other people. I was compiling things. I helped them select a committee for an important project that they were doing. And I had really never felt trusted, valued, and respected by adults before that in my life, by people in power. Um, and that experience was life changing for me because I'm 13. I'm going to work in this big office building that I needed a key card to get into. And they got another intern while I was working there. He was a second year law student. And when he showed up, they were like, Lincoln will show you what to do. She knows what to do. She's going to show you the ropes and all that. And again, I'm 13. Like I was like, oh my God, they're trusting me with this level of work. I must actually bring value to them, which was like mind blowing to me because I didn't have the same experience or education as they did, but I worked on real things for them. And that moment was just so life changing to me because I realized that, first of all, I had power. And second of all, there were more ways to change the world than just waiting until I was older and being an elected official. I realized that if I wanted to, I could change the world now because that's what they were doing in that organization without being elected officials. And if they let me do that in that organization, I realized I could do that in any situation, anywhere I wanted to. So from that moment, after having had that internship, I really dove into this whole like community organizing, advocating for education thing because I was empowered to do that by adults who trusted me and respected me. And that is an experience that I want every single student to have, is that trust, that respect, that power that is given by adults and people in power. And I just think that is so important. And I'm noticing that there are still some people joining us right now. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. And I would love to hear a little introduction in the chat. I would love to know who you guys are. So just as you join, please introduce yourself. Um, but yeah, I'm going to move on a little bit. And, back to Bridgemakers. And for everyone who just joined, Bridgemakers is the organization that Walter and I are from. Walter runs the organization. We're basically just student-led completely, a group of student advocates. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what has the activation of student voice, leadership, stories, and power done for Bridgemakers? Why is that important? And what has that done in order for us to be successful? So Minnesota unemployment campaign. You may have read about this a little bit briefly, but just a little introduction to this. Minnesota is one of the only states in the country where high school students don't have access to unemployment benefits. Walter and I were both impacted by that. Actually, maybe Walter, you can share why that was important to you and how you were impacted by that before we dive into this issue.
Man, yes. So, man, sorry, just a lot of reminiscing over this past year. I can't believe it's been a year. But so when COVID hit, I was working at a car wash that I had been working since I was like 13, 14. Because as I mentioned, my parents got deported. Beforehand, I was working two jobs, but it became too heavy for me as a young person. So I worked one job and still went to school. When COVID hit, like car wash is clean, and so it's already like dirty in the first place, a lot of germs, a lot of like bacteria. And so like as soon as the first signs of all this started happening, like now car wash just shut down. And maybe for some other students or not so many I could say, but they didn't quite need that money I could say. But for me, like my example, I specifically needed that money to continue to live, I could say, because I was paying my rent, my utility bills, like all these bills that you need to like, maintain, like to stay alive and whatnot. And I was also helping my mother in Mexico City who had breast cancer at the time. And so she wasn't able to work. She was living with my little brother who was about 5 or 6 at the time. Um, I don't know his exact age, but yeah. And I was just hoping to take care of them. So just like I said, like when I lost my job, it wasn't just about me. I could say it was more about my family and my mama and my little brother. I was very lost and confused, very hurt about like where I was going to work from. And then like I started hearing about these benefits, about like the government, like being able to help you. And so I was like, I bet I'll apply for unemployment assistance because I lost my job. Um, and it comes to find out that like I wasn't eligible, and it wasn't for like any big rule or any big like the amount of hours I worked or that I didn't work in or so forth. No, it was simply the status that I was a high school student. And for me, that was just very, it got me mad, like one, the government, I know not like directly, but indirectly through policies and laws and whatnot, like, they took upon my family and now they weren't helping me just because I was in high school. I thought being in high school was a good thing. And so it was just very confusing time, and I don't want to get too much into the campaign story, so I'll stop there and just pass it over to Lincoln.
Yeah, so I mean, Walter, though, it's very important to note, was not the only person who was severely impacted by this. So it really got both of us fired up. But I guess personally, I also would have regularly qualified for unemployment benefits. I was working 3 jobs at the time that the pandemic hit. And so when I was unable to work, everyone encouraged me to apply for unemployment. I received a letter in the mail that said how much I would have gotten from unemployment and that I would have qualified, except just being in high school disqualified me. Like I worked enough hours, I made enough money that in any other case, the government would have been paying me unemployment. And I know the same was true for Walter. The only disqualifier is that we were in high school. So this was very upsetting. And as we started to talk to more people about this, I realized that this was impacting so many other people in Minnesota. And it really presented a lot of people with this choice that's like, do you stay in high school and potentially not have the money you need to survive, or do you drop out in order to receive the benefits you need in order to like pay rent, to go to school, to pursue a higher education? And I actually met a lot of people who were in that same situation. I met students who were, I was mostly taking classes at the University of Minnesota through PSEO. So for all purposes, I was a college student, except for my enrollment in a high school, which again is just ridiculous that that is the one disqualifier from receiving benefits. It seemed like every other group in the country was eligible for some kind of COVID aid besides us as high school students in Minnesota. So what did we do? We started working with Youth Prize, which is a nonprofit organization in Minnesota. We started building a coalition of adults, of young people, speaking to students who were impacted, gathering their testimonies, having them share their stories, and recording those stories, posting them on social media to get people's attention. Eventually, Walter wrote an op-ed that was published in the Pioneer Press that got us some attention. It was excellent. If you want to read more, you can just honestly Google either of our names and read what we've written about this. And it was a really difficult time for everyone. I know everyone was trying to survive, but it's also like, we need to get these benefits for young people. So that's something that we worked on and actually have been working on for the past entire year since the pandemic started. And eventually, as our coalition grew, we actually got a bill. We started testifying in committee. We had a bill in the House, a bill in the Senate. And I know we weren't necessarily everyone's priority, especially with George Floyd's murder, with the pandemic. There were so many things going on. And Minnesota having the only divided legislature in the country, split between Democrats and Republicans. So we're negotiating with everyone. We're meeting with legislators. We're trying to get people on board with our campaign. So obviously, again, it was a really difficult time, and we're not being paid for this, and we're not being paid at all because we don't have jobs. And I personally, like, my mom takes care of her mom, so I didn't want to put and I'm living in the same house as my mom. I don't want to put her and my grandmother in danger, so I can't go and try to get a job. I can't try to be in the workforce at this time because that's dangerous for the people that I live with. And I know a lot of other people were in this situation. So I see there are some links in the chat if you wanted to read a little bit more about this, about what we've been doing. But yeah, so we just kept pushing, and we kept growing this team of young people who were working on these benefits. We got in the news, we got over 55 articles written about us. We got on TV, we had bills in each of the special sessions. It was just one organization standing in our way, which is Minnesota DEED. And no hate to them or anything. They're the people who pay out the benefits, but they just sort of decided that high school students were not going to qualify for benefits no matter what we did. And so that was difficult, but maybe Walter can speak to this a little bit, because it actually got in the summer, this empowerment of young people and this constant uplifting of young people actually got the attention of larger national organizations. And we actually got some funding to start doing this work. Maybe Walter can speak to that. And that's kind of how Bridgemakers came into being.
Yeah, Lincoln, I just love how this whole story just flowing so smooth. I gotta say that. But yeah, so as Lincoln mentioned, like, there was just a lot of young people just gathering together, like coalitions, and then one day Youth Prize, they called like bridge makers. Like bridge makers still like a concept, I could say. It wasn't a 503(c) quite yet. And so we were just a group just calling us like bridge makers. That's what we call ourselves. And then Youth Prize, they hit us up, and like we had a meeting, and they were like, there's this opportunity for a national grant from now the former Woodrow Wilson Foundation. And they were giving out about like 150,000, 130,000 to like projects helping young people uplift themselves during COVID and voter registration. And we were like, you know what, this fits perfectly for us. We could really benefit and leverage that money to reach the goals and the outcomes that we're trying to reach with the UI campaign. And so we applied for it, we submitted a grant, and we got accepted 1 out of 6 in the whole country out of 135 submissions, I think that's what, or the applicants. And so that was a very big moment for the young people and for bridge makers just in general. It really allowed us to step up to a new level. We got more student leaders, more community leaders to like help us be a part of our ambassadorship, as we call it. We formed a more solid, more focused, full-time team of young people called the Minnesota Young Champions. And they really helped us just gather stories. We created a video series of episodes, just pushing out like documentaries and just so forth, and that really led us to, or Lincoln, do you want to say the outcome of the UI benefits?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to. I love telling this part of the story. So first of all, just before I move on from this part, I just want to say, what happens when you give young people the resources to do this kind of work? Because up until this point, it's important to note, we were doing this for free. Walter and I were on these calls probably like 5 or 6 days a week, probably like 5 or 6 hours a day doing this stuff for free. We were not getting paid. And I really think it's important that young people get paid for this kind of work, because a lot of the time we are expected to want to be okay with doing this for free. And especially in a pandemic when we had lost our jobs, and the whole point of this issue is making sure young people are paid and are able to take care of themselves. It was exceptional to receive that money and for that organization to take a chance on us as a group of young people willing to make change. So with those resources, now that we were able to pay people, and now that we were able to build a group of young people dedicated to working on this and dedicated to advancing equity for young people, we got a lawyer, and he did it for free. He was like, we'd always thought like legal options, whatever, but we had been working with the legislature for almost 6 months at that point with zero outcomes. And every time we had had a victory, every time we had gotten a new person over to our side, a new issue would arise, something that young people and no actual constituents should have to take care of. They were like, oh, find money in the budget, in the state budget, for us to do this for you, or find money from the federal government. And we're like, okay, well, you guys are the politicians. It's actually not our job to find this money. But we found the money. We found money for them in the federal budget, in grants that the government was paying to the state. We found money for them to pay this. And, of course, a new issue would arise. So we were like, okay, time to sue the state of Minnesota. So you know what we did? We sued the state of Minnesota. Almost immediately, we won the lawsuit. $70 million of federal pandemic unemployment assistance, guaranteed to be paid out to young people over the course of the pandemic. Now, it's important to note this pandemic assistance ends this September, but that win was incredible. And we were actually able to take a little break as an organization. That win allowed us to meet with the governor, meet with the attorney general, who stood with us the entire time and did not take the case against us. The attorney general stepped back. He wrote a note and he said, I'm with these kids. They deserve to win. Because you know what we did? We deserve to win.
I to say something like little I could say.
Of course.
I don't know, I like sharing this because it just makes this moment almost special, or just like as a young person, But I actually got the news like 4 hours before my 18th birthday that we had won this lawsuit, And so for me being a young person and just the whole coalition or the whole organization led fully by young people, like as Lincoln said, I'm the president, the vice president is a youth as well. Like the board is comprised of like everything is just youth, And for the fact that young people were able to come together through the power of hardships and just strength and endurance, we were able to overcome this. And I don't know, it was just a very special moment for me and just for the team. And yeah, I don't know, I just want to share that with you all, especially like given the tragedies I shared like earlier about the government not so much being in our favor, but apparently they don't always have to be in our favor. There's other ways around it to achieve the outcome that we can have. I just
Yeah.
want to share that. So sorry.
No, totally. I love that you said that, because this is what happens when you give young people power and give them the resources to lead and to take charge on issues that matter to us. And, really in the group, Walter and I, and maybe one other person, were the only ones who had been doing this kind of work before the pandemic. Everyone else was passionate about this, joined in, and is absolutely incredible at this kind of stuff now. Like that's all it takes is maybe some money, like a job, stable resources, and some mentorship. And that's all it takes for young people to be successful in this kind of environment. We didn't sit down and train anyone. It's important to note. Everyone just figured this shit out on their own. Just being in high school, being high school graduates. We're just some kids, but we did this as just kids. And I think that's a really important point. But yeah, basically, we're still working on this now, though, with the legislature. Although the session is over, that was only pandemic unemployment assistance. We're currently working to permanently change Minnesota state law in order to make high school students always people who qualify for unemployment benefits and state benefits, not these federal benefits that are going to expire in September. So that is what we're working on at the moment. And Bridgemakers also now has a staff of 11 young people total, and we have two, it's about to be 3 or 2 adult mentors who guide us through this whole process.
With a board of directors and like it's just crazy. Like
you have a board of directors. Yep.
Like I know you guys all or not all like know this, but like it's like the nonprofit world, But just again, back to the whole concept of this workshop, the empowerment, the uplifting of student voice could really have a ripple effect that can change history forever. Like what bridge makers, what me and Lincoln did, like, and these young people, was a one in history thing. It had never been done before, never across the whole country, never in history. So for us to do this was just very big. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna interrupt you. I don't know, this moment is just really special, but like we were even on New York Times, on some of the biggest magazines across the whole country, and it was just crazy. Like, this whole experience was more crazy. Yeah, sorry there. I just want to mention all this excitement, all this empowerment of young student voice. I live in it because it is just what I live for. This is all that Bridgemakers aims to do. It's very much important because it's people's lives. Like I said, I was very scared about how I was gonna help my mama, how I was gonna help others and myself. But yeah, I love the story that young people were able to do in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I hope that, I mean, I've seen it happen. I like that you said that with the ripple effect, because young people are going to see this and they're going to know that they have power. And that's the thing about my education, is my education for the most part was very disempowering, and it made me feel very much like, I can't really do anything until I have a lot of money and maybe have a big position in the government. But other than that, I can't have an impact on people. And that is what I was told. That is what I learned. Maybe I can vote, but not till I'm 18. And even though you can vote, you're only one vote. So what does that even do? And that's kind of the rhetoric that I heard growing up throughout my education. So, and I know it's even worse for a lot of other young people experiencing different kinds of marginalization. So just to see that this group of young people could have this kind of win, I think is really important. But we're going to pause here just for a moment. If anybody has any questions, reactions, comments to this, feel free to unmute and just speak to that. We would like to hold a little space for this at the moment.
And we like awkward silence so we can sit here. Um,
So this is Steve Kelly. Congratulations, awesome work. Um, I'm curious to know sort of, Lincoln made some comments about broader lessons, but I'm interested in what you guys think we can do to make sure that more young people have the kind of learning opportunities that the two of you had on a real life project.
Yeah, so you actually that is the next part of our presentation. That is actually a perfect segue into the next thing that we wanted to talk about. So we will get into that in just a moment. I just wanted to make sure that everything was very clear with the unemployment thing that we talked about. So if anybody had any questions about that, feel free. But thank you for that, because that is an excellent transition.
that is I don't know. Maybe this isn't exactly to the presentation, Lincoln, but I don't just want to leave our audience and thinking that like my life was all tragedies, because I did give a lot of hardships in there. My mom actually healed from breast cancer. She's doing very well. My little brother's exceptionally well in school as well. I am not on the streets no more or homeless. I was able to get my own place through the help of bridge makers, actually, the help of the money that was funded into these projects. I am about to graduate high school, like I said, and I just want to share these things. So I don't want to leave you all with all these tragedies. But yeah, and also my mother did get her Visa card this spring, so she will be coming back very soon. And I just want to share that news with y'all, so it doesn't end on such a sad note.
And we love to hear it. Thank you for sharing that. I think that we should get into the next section of the presentation, because I saw a question in the chat and I want to answer Steve Kelly's question too. So how can you do this in your learning environment? And real quick, if everyone could answer in the chat, in what ways have you or your organization activated student voice, stories, leadership, and power? Even if it was unsuccessful, what ways have you tried to do this? You can also share this out loud if you would like to do that, or share in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. But we would love to hear how you have tried to do this in the past, how that went.
Hey, this is Erin from Oscar Wilds. I was going to type this all in there and then I realized it was really long. So I'm just going to say it. This has been coming up a lot at our organization because we're a charter school authorizer. So we're a few steps removed from directly interacting with kids, right? We don't work in the schools necessarily. And we've been talking a lot about how often when we are prototyping new ideas and processes, we talk to school leaders and we talk to board members, but not necessarily families and kids, even though they are the ones most likely to be impacted by the changes and practices that we implement, down the road, but that's what's going to happen. And so we are really thinking about, as part of this move towards liberatory design and thinking around that, how do we know what voices aren't at the table? And then how do we make sure we incorporate them as we're gathering feedback to inform changes at our office?
Yeah, I love to hear that. Definitely students and parents are really often left out from conversations about education.
Yeah, they're the stakeholders that are never actually.
Yeah, and so to that end, we're organizing our leaders retreat for August. And so we are going to put together a student panel. We just did an authorizer training and that also included a student panel because those voices do not get elevated to a lot of the policymakers, not just at the Capitol, but also policymakers within organizations that impact schools.
If I could just jump in for a second, Lincoln, I just wanted to mention this, and I will be bringing up the concept up in the next 26 minutes, but I I do just would encourage not just to listen to young people, but actually put them in positions to actually make the change. And I know that kind of may seem very similar, but a lot of times a lot of opportunities or a lot of things where I was able to speak at was more of just power in me to speak up, but not to empower. And by empower I mean actually putting a young person in a position where the actual voice vote and whatsoever matters, just as bridge makers and as we do with the process with the theories that we live in. And yeah, not just to tokenize, I could say. I see that a lot in a lot of adult-led programs, and I'm not saying that that's the approach you're trying to do. I'm just saying that I would like for you all to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I love to hear what people are sharing here and also in the chat. It really, feels great that people are actually doing this as school authorizers and as people who work in schools, because a lot of the time it can feel to us that we're alone in feeling the way we do about student voice being involved in education, because often I hear very negative things from my peers who went to traditional high schools and graduated from there. So I love to hear that you guys are working to involve young people, to put them on panels, to hear from them in public settings. And yeah, I'm just glad that people in this workshop are already working on that. So we are gonna introduce a concept here to you guys, and there's a bit of a story to go with it, but this is something that we are very passionate about. It's called Change Makers. So a Change Makers team is a student-led school improvement seminar working to identify areas for improvement within schools and discussing solutions and then actually implementing those solutions. So maybe Walter, you could share the story of Venture Change Makers briefly, and then we can really get into what this looks like.
Thanks. And sorry I keep kind of turning off my camera. My dogs is being so hectic. I have two pit bull huskies. But Change Makers, so Change Makers was actually the follow-up a year later about my experience at Venture Academy, being able to speak to the board of directors. I and a few other students like Lincoln and other youth leaders, we formed a team of Change Makers at school. That was where actually Bridge Makers comes from, but Change Makers was focused on this concept of actually to empower young people and give them the opportunity, the stage and the tools, the resources, the mentorship that they need to learn how to speak to the adults that are in charge of the systems, the control of what they learn on a day-to-day, like the teachers, administration, deans, whatnot, so forth, to achieve the change that they want to best learn in that environment. And we were talking a little bit more than something than just student government. Student government is one of the ways the school tokenizes people. It's not really the best way, in my opinion. And so change makers, right? And we started to get mentorship from one of our coaches, John McCall, actually. I'm not sure if he's in this call, but and he helped us a lot with knowing how the school system works, who's in charge of who's able to make the important decisions, you know. At first, we had a plan to walk through, and not walk through, to talk to our teachers and see if they were able to help us with the outcomes that we were trying to achieve. I'm guessing, as you all may know, teachers aren't in the necessary like position to make big change. And so we realized that speaking with teachers was
Supposed to be.
to the deans, and we spoke to more of the like administration of the school, and we saw that that was a little bit more of a impact, we could say. And then we really were like, you know what, this is not doing it for us. We need to speak to the principal, to the director of the school. That wasn't necessarily the smoothest transaction because, as we all know, school leaders have a lot of their own plans and implementation that they want to see. Um, uh, in their school year, and for young people to come and offer all these things, it was just something new, I could say. And so it wasn't the smoothest transition because it was the end of the year as well. But we're like, you know what, board of directors, we were like, you know what, we're gonna like work on the presentation with 11 young people to be able to speak to the board of directors and really share the issues that we care about. And so we did have an amazing presentation. We practiced for many hours and many weeks. We spoke to the board of directors, and they were very impressed with the presentation we gave, with the outcomes that we were trying to achieve, and so forth. And yeah, I do want to stop there and may pass it over back to Lincoln.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And so we had this Changemakers team at Venture, and I would like to share a success story that we had and what it really looks like when a school invests in young people. So we were sitting there and we were like, okay, these are all the things that we identified 4 big areas for improvement within the school. We split up into committees to address those issues. But we received some advice from some staff members that it's only 3.5 months until the end of the school year. So we should pick only one of those things because we weren't actually going to be able to get all of that done. So we were like, okay, what's the main thing that we can do? We picked mentorship. Venture was supposed to have a mentor for every student who was going to meet with that student regularly. And we noticed that teachers weren't always being held accountable to having those meetings with students, and students weren't always receiving the mentorship that they needed. So we set up a new system of mentorship in the school, and a system of accountability for the adults. And we met with one of the adult staff leaders of the learning environment. So we talked to her, we received some kind of negative feedback, and it was kind of disheartening. We weren't really being listened to, we weren't really being respected in that moment, but we actually did get some changes made in the school. And I've actually heard some great feedback. I've since graduated from Venture, but I've heard some great feedback from a student who still goes there that the mentorship program now is excellent, and that he has an excellent mentor who is meeting with him regularly, talking to him not only about his academics, but also about his personal life and anything else that he needs help with. So we did have that impact on the school. And really, I just think it's important, if every school had one of these teams, if every school had a student-led school improvement seminar, not only would that whole one-size-fits-all model that we know doesn't work be gone out of these schools, but students in these groups would learn how to build power, how to negotiate, how to present to adults in a professional and respectful way, how to build responsibility. But it's also like when you get to design your own learning environment, you suddenly have a stake in that learning environment, and school starts to matter more to you because it is your school and it is a school that you are helping to build. And handing that power and that shared responsibility to young people, I think, is one of the biggest things you can do to make students feel empowered. Because it's one thing to just let them speak on a panel and let them like share their opinions. And it's another thing to actually be like, I am going to implement your ideas because I value your voice and opinion, and I would like to see you be a leader in this environment. And that's something that I think is missing, is the action step. A lot of people will listen to young people speak and they will just leave it at that. But what Changemakers is about is having that space for young people to speak, but also having that partnership with the adult leadership of the school to actually have young people be decision makers and have those actions be executed. And another thing I think is important is in these student government models, and actually initially in Venture Changemakers, there were some people who wanted there to be a GPA requirement. You know, if you're not doing well in school, you can't be in Changemakers. I think that's ridiculous, because people who have lower grades, people who are not doing as well in school by these traditional metrics, are the people who need change makers the most, because clearly that school is not working for them and is not doing right for them, because low grades are not an indication of anything being wrong with the student. They are an indication of the school not meeting that student's needs. And I have found that to be true always, because sometimes students are really slacking off. Sometimes they are really not doing their work, but maybe that's because they have something going on in their personal lives. And maybe that's because that classroom is not interesting to them, is not engaging to them. And that's something that needs to be addressed. So change makers, the idea of change makers, it's for everyone. It is for every single person in that school, people who the school is working for and people who the school is not working for. And I think that is a really, really important thing. There should never be a requirement to be involved in a leadership position. So even if a student has like poor attendance, low grades, whatever, you should be in change makers. And that's another way also, is if a student is skipping school, wouldn't you want them to feel that the school cares about them and that the school wants them to be involved and is giving them leadership? Because maybe they'll start to show up to school more, and maybe they'll be more involved because they'll feel that the school is actually a place for them and not just a place for people who are able to traditionally play the system. When I was in high school, I was really good at playing the system. I was really good at doing all of the things that I had to do in order to be successful. And eventually I got to a point where I was sick of it because it wasn't benefiting me at all. But for a really long time in my education, I just played that system. And I don't really think I learned very much from doing that, but I got really good grades. And teachers would be like, wow, Lincoln, you're doing so well in school. But that's just because I knew what to do in order to receive that. I knew how to play that system. It's not that I was learning. So I think that's important. But what we would really like to emphasize here is that as bridge makers, as this group of young people trying to change the world, trying to change education, trying to change the state of Minnesota, we would love to partner with you guys if you are interested in setting up a change makers team in any of your learning environments, or if you have a learning environment you would like to connect us to. So we're going to share our contact information too here. But this is important because, you know, it's a difficult thing to figure out by yourself, and it's taken us a lot of trial and error to figure out what a changemakers team should look like. And because obviously it's going to look different in every single environment that it exists in. So we would love to be there for you and partner with you and help convince other people, if necessary, that this is something that your learning environment should do. So that's we would like to offer our services in that way. And we would love to be a part of building change makers in every single learning environment. Because again, I think that if every single school had a change makers team, if that means that every single voice in that school is being heard, there is not a student being left behind. And, you know, every student really feels like they belong at school, which is really, you know, not something that I feel schools usually value, is that sense of belonging and that sense of like there being an adult who cares about you. So we got that. And yeah, we would love to do that. That's how I think that's the best way to change education, actually, is like we can make all the policy changes that we want. Well, we can't because that's very difficult. But even if we made all of these policy changes, the people making those policy changes are adults. They're not students. They're not actually involved in these learning environments. So how are they going to know what's best for young people? So I think the most powerful thing we can do to change education, which I know you guys are interested in, or else you wouldn't have picked this workshop, or you wouldn't even come to this conference probably. But the biggest thing and the most powerful thing that we can do is go from the bottom up and start in each individual school and put these teams in every single school in the state. So yeah, I would love to, I'm reading the chat. Yeah, transactional versus transformational, love to hear it. I'm really glad you guys are engaged in this. I would actually like to open this up a little bit. You can unmute and speak if you would like. Just have a brief little conversation. If anyone has any questions, comments, responses, any barriers you could see to doing this in your learning environment, or like any reason why you would not want to do this, or why you would see this as something that wouldn't be valuable to you or a learning environment. We would love to hear that and discuss it. So yeah, I'm gonna give y'all a minute to share anything you would like to share.
Hi, Lincoln, Walter. This is Danica. I just want to clarify, when you're offering your services, just to be clear, given what you spoke about earlier, would this be a consulting role for the two of you?
More so, yeah, sorry.
Good, paid.
So
I'm just making sure
just
that if people are clear, it's paid.
yeah, logisticals and to practicality, yeah, Bridgemakers is offering consulting services to schools and leaders who actually want to work with this concept of Bridgemakers. We are working with some superintendents across the state to put together a movement for change makers. So if you all want to hop on the wave, hop on the bandwagon, then please feel free to reach out. And we'll put our social medias and our contacts at the end of the presentation. And thank you for clarifying that.
I'm wondering if you two can speak a little bit to the idea of using outside organizations to gather student voice and how that can sometimes dilute what the message is coming from students by having them have to go through a certain process. For example, our school had a group, like an equity group, come in from the outside to interview students, and then that group was the one relaying the information to leadership. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts about whether or not the information needs to come directly from students, or if it can come from students kind of through an intermediary? Like, is there more power in one, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's very important to note that when we are offering our services, we want to help you set up that Changemakers team. We don't want to work with your school forever. Eventually, Changemakers team should be self-sufficient, and we just want to be there to sort of help students get comfortable. As so many people have been disempowered throughout their education, and so many marginalized groups have been historically disempowered just in society and in the structures of like the way that our society works. We want to be there to make students and staff members comfortable with this like symbiotic relationship. I think that's the right word. But basically, eventually when first of all, we don't want the information ever to be relayed through us. The information should go directly from the young people to the staff members, and from the staff members to the young people in a conversation. There should always be dialogue between these groups. But in most, traditional hierarchies within schools, that kind of pathway doesn't exist. And we are there to create that pathway to ensure that adults are actually implementing the ideas that young people are passionate about and holding those adults accountable to that. But we are also holding the young people accountable to having this group and getting them inspired and impassioned about it so that they will be able to run it completely on their own. And we will be able to leave, and then there will just be a school with a Changemakers team that functions entirely on its own. We don't have a separate website for Changemakers, but I will drop the Bridgemakers website in the chat in just 1 second.
And I would just bounce off what Lincoln said. Yeah, we would very much prefer and would want the students directly from the school speaking to their administration to be able to make that change. Um, in my opinion, I feel like an outside organization can be like excluded, or the contract could be cut off or something if it's not going as smooth as they wanted to, just some like legal terms. But students, stakeholders, families, people who actually give money to the school, like 7,000, 11,000 per kid to each school per district. So it's like that is a little bit more of a safer, more impactful way that we would believe the students would be able to make the actual change. Because it's not like they're gonna expel a student for trying to make a change for the school. Like, I don't see that happening. But yeah, I guess that'd be my response, just piggybacking off Lincoln.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Sure.
I also see a question in the chat that I wanted to address. Basically, what are our suggestions for ensuring students actively stay involved in a youth-led program? First of all, there should be time and space built into the school day. This should not be an after-school activity. Not every student has the privilege of being able to attend an after-school activity. This should be something that is happening during the school day when students would already be in the building. Second of all, if this would help, students should get credit for participating in this. Personally, I think being in a Changemakers team has given me presentation skills, facilitation skills, writing skills, public speaking skills, all of these skills that students should be learning in classes. So why not give students actual credit for participating in this? Maybe it's like an English credit, maybe it's like a civics credit if you do that. But give them a credit for being there, make their time valuable, you know, like have this be something that shows up on their transcript when they graduate, have it be something that helps students graduate. You know, like sometimes students need that incentive to show up because, you know, if their worry and their struggle is to graduate, then maybe they don't have time for an elective that isn't gonna help them get to that goal. So honestly, like it's really also important that this isn't just for the betterment of the school, this is also for the betterment of each young person involved in it. You are gaining skills, you are becoming a more powerful individual just by being a part of this. So I would say, you know, give them credit, give them a space and a time during the school day. And honestly, if you need to, feed them. Students will always show up for free food. And some students don't have that access to all the meals they need outside of the school building. So sometimes students are coming to school and that's the only place that they're going to eat in a day. So it's another great incentive to be feeding them during the school day.
And I guess for my initial response, I have a lot of to agree with what Lincoln said. I did want to add on the components of uh two things. Maybe you did say this, Lincoln, but I did want to bring it up again. I would say one is being clear. How Lincoln said, we gotta know why we're doing this, exactly what the outcome will be. You know, like that is what kept me involved a lot. You know, I really wasn't ever so into electives or like a program of school. It just wasn't my thing. You know, I had more higher priorities to focus on my family and working and whatnot. But the fact that me being here was me using my voice and being able to actually make change, being able to actually impact my future, it really made it so like I want to be here every day. I want to talk as much as I can. I want to do all these things, you know. And then I'd say a second component would be like mentorship, like a really like big thing that kept me on the rails of this path of leadership was mentorship. I was guided by uh my school director, as I said, John Bacall. He was very helpful in the sense of like painting a larger picture for me why it mattered. Just to help gain that clarity, I could say a lot of times young people don't know what we don't know, or just people in general, like, we don't know what we don't know. So for someone to be able to share with us their life experiences, their knowledge, what resources to use and what resources not to use, it was very, very helpful. And just again to the food, because food is key, and some of us don't always have those meals. And then second, credit really needs to be a thing that's bolded. It's like you get credit for this. And second, to the what Lincoln said, the transcript, thousands of millions of high school students graduate with A pluses, with A's. Like that's common, very, that's what everybody strives for. You know, when like thousands of colleges see these applications, oh, they try to be the best students with AP classes, all A's and so forth. But what about the young people who make change in their community? People who actually impact people's lives, you know? I really feel like that would be very exceptional. And so yeah, I would say
Yeah,
that.
definitely. I mean, honestly, like with the credit thing, give students an A just for being in change makers. Don't give them ever anything below that because just by being there, showing up, having a conversation, you deserve that A. There's like on it. Personally, I think the whole grading system should be thrown out because I do not think it reflects the value that young people bring automatically to the world. I think it negates that. But, you know, just by being a part of change makers, just by wanting to be there and make an impact on the community, you deserve an A on your transcript for that. But yeah, I would also just say like young people often do not trust that just by participating in something like this, change will be made because it has not been previously demonstrated to them. So even if students sit there and the first thing they start out by saying is we need more breaks in the day, or like we want lunch to be better and lunch to be longer, or even if it's something that like does not seem valuable to you guys, or like seems kind of like, well, that's not really why we're here, that's not really important, we need to like, you need to make those changes first, and you need to prove to young people that you are willing to work with them, and that when they actually care about something, you will get it done for them and you will make that happen. They just need that example of changes being made because they want that change to be made, because that doesn't happen for young people. And also there is a survey in the chat for the Bush Foundation that they would love if you guys would finish, so I just wanted to give that a little shout out. But yeah, does anyone, I think we have time for like maybe one more question or one more comment here about this. Really appreciate everything y'all have been sharing here, and I hope that y'all would be willing to work with us or continue this conversation, even if you would like to talk to people in Bridgemakers about this. I've got some social media information for you guys. Love if you hit us up. Love if you followed us, connected with us. Maybe Walter and I can drop our emails in the chat too, so you can reach out if you would like to.
And check out my LinkedIn, y'all.
Oh yeah, for real, add us on LinkedIn. We always got to promote the LinkedIn. We started doing that recently as an organization.
Reach out. I'll even drop my phone number if everyone want to call me. I don't know if I'm gonna get this, but let's see what's up.
Yeah, but please honestly reach out to us. I personally love to hear from adults who are passionate about this same kind of thing, because again, a lot of what we do, we're fighting against people who do not agree with us. And so I just love to connect with like-minded adults, and it really makes me feel that, you know, we are not alone in the work that we are doing. So please hit us up, please connect with us. And yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. We really appreciate each and every one of you being here today. And I have loved to read in the chat what you guys and hear what you've shared out loud, what you guys are already doing and already working on. So yeah, again, I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. Reach out to us. Start a Changemakers team in your learning environment. Change the world. And I think that's the most powerful thing you can do as an adult in power in education, is to start that team and hand the power over to young people, because we will take it from there and we're going to change the world.
Thanks. God, Lincoln, I love how you speak so great. But yes, just thank you all for being here. I hope you guys all have a good rest of your week. Enjoy the summer while we have it here. Y'all know Minnesota really cold, or at least the Midwest. But yeah, thank you all for listening to us. It takes a lot of bravery, I could say, a lot of courage to actually listen to young people. As Lincoln's mentioned, a lot of adults don't really listen to young people. They actually shut us down. So thank you all for being here.
Wow. Thank you so much, Walter and Lincoln. I felt blessed the entire time just listening to y'all. The future is going to be all right. Like, I am so excited for the future that is in your hands. I trust y'all. And if I don't even have a baton near me, but if I did, I'd pass it, because y'all got us. No, really, y'all got us. And if this is what we can expect from some students who had to go through a whole pandemic and file a lawsuit and get their voice heard amidst all of these life events, then y'all can do anything. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all the attendees who joined us. I hope that you were as blessed as I was to be a part of this conversation. Please join us tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time for our closing session. We really wanted to make sure that we focused on healing and creating a student-centered approach. We will be having a student panel full of 3rd, 4th, 5th graders and some high school seniors to talk about their experience in terms of healing in healing through disruption. So we are so glad that you could make it. Y'all take care. We'll hopefully see you soon.